remember the night I first touched the dress. It was almost 2 a.m, the whole house still and hushed under the weight of the late hour. I'd crept out of bed like I was conducting some secret mission. The closet door made a soft squeak, and even that tiny noise sent a jolt through my body. My wife, Sarah, slept in the next room, her slow, even breathing the only sign that my life hadn't been completely swallowed by guilt. My fingertips found the garment bag, and it had taken every ounce of my will not to zip it down too quickly. Inside, her wedding dress waited, suspended by a sleek hanger, the ivory lace and smooth satin shimmering faintly in the dim overhead light. That night, the first of many like it, I didn't put it on. I only felt the material, let my palm rest on the swirl of lace at the waist. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. It was impossible to tell if my trembling came from fear or from an unspoken longing I had wrestled with since my teens. I'm a tall man, over 6 feet, broad shoulders, dark hair that's always been a bit unruly no matter how many times I run a comb through it. I never thought of myself as someone who would be hiding personal habits from my spouse. Sarah and I had dated throughout college, tied the knot in our mid-20s, and now we were both inching into our 30s. She had always been beautiful to me, with brown hair that fell around her shoulders, sharp eyes that somehow sparkled when she laughed, and a determined spirit that made her excel in everything she put her mind to. The story I'm about to tell could have ended up as a short, secret footnote in the ledger of my life, a detail never uncovered, never confronted. But Sarah's wedding dress changed that. There was a night, perhaps a year into our marriage, when I found myself standing there longer than usual, holding a fold of the fabric. My breathing was slow but intense, my stomach in knots. I let the satin run through my hand over and over, feeling a profound connection to her, to our past, to the day we both said "I do" under a bright sky in front of our closest family and friends. Yet at the same time there was distance, a barrier between what I presented to Sarah and what I held inside. It wasn't just about wearing a piece of clothing. It was about grappling with who I was, without using that exact word that would so easily reduce my complex emotions to a tidy label. I didn't put the dress on, but I couldn't deny how much I wanted to. Over the next few days, I was a mess of nerves. At work, I'd catch myself drifting into daydreams about that midnight moment in the closet. My job in a small digital marketing company wasn't particularly stressful, but I found myself typing the same emails multiple times because my mind wandered to lace and satin and that hush of darkness that made me feel both safe and uneasy. My coworker, Aaron, noticed I was on edge. "James," he said one afternoon, stepping up to my cubicle, "you've been real quiet today. Usually you're the first to crack jokes about everything. Everything okay?" Aaron was a friend. We'd been hired around the same time, went out for beers once a month, and sometimes talked about the serious stuff in life. But this wasn't something I could share so easily. I forced a small grin. "I'm good. Just some stuff at home on my mind." His brow furrowed, but he didn't pry too hard. "If you need to vent, I'm here," he replied. "I know sometimes it helps to just talk." I nodded, muttered a thank you, and tried to push my mind back to the marketing campaign for our new client. Yet the guilt and longing lingered, a subtle ache in my chest. That evening, Sarah and I sat at the dinner table. She had cooked chicken stir-fry, one of her specialties. The smell of soy sauce and ginger wafted through the kitchen as she served the plates. "You're quiet lately," she observed, handing me a fork. Her gaze was level, searching. "Work stuff?" "Kind of," I lied, and I hated myself for it. "We've got a big campaign going on, and it's just lots of moving pieces." She gave me a small, understanding nod. "Well, I'm here if you need a sounding board." I reached across the table, laying my hand over hers. "Thanks," I said softly, wishing I could spill the secret right then. But the words choked in my throat. The fear of looking at her shocked face, the possibility that my hidden habits might threaten our marriage, clamped my jaw shut. Once dinner was over, we settled onto the couch to watch a show. Sarah leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, her hand casually playing with my hair. My body tensed when her fingers strayed near my ear, almost like a reflex that came from the tension coiled deep in my chest. She felt it, pulled back a bit, and looked up at me. "You sure everything's fine?" she asked, brow creased. "Yeah, of course," I insisted, forcing a smile. I leaned down to kiss her, as though that gesture could reassure her, and me, that everything was normal. She smiled against my lips, but I noticed the shadow of worry that lingered in her expression. When she finally dozed off later that night, I slipped quietly from the bed. My heart thumped wildly as I padded down the hall to the closet again. The garment bag was there, unmoving, silent, yet it felt like it beckoned me. My fingers shook a little as I reached for it. I only let my palm rest on the outside this time, not daring to open it for too long. Sometimes I wondered whether this was more than I could handle. Was I being deceitful? Was my sense of closeness to Sarah overshadowed by my secret urge? I closed the closet and returned to bed, my pulse still racing. Sarah stirred slightly, turning over. I lay on my side, eyes wide, thinking that I might have to confront this hidden part of me more concretely sooner or later. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to dance around the truth. Sometimes I'd take a different piece of her clothing, something that wouldn't be as obviously missed if I forgot to put it back correctly. Usually it was a sweater or a simple blouse. I never wore any of her clothes for very long, just a few moments to absorb the sensation, to experience a wave of emotion. Sometimes it made me feel closer to her, oddly enough. Other times, it filled me with an almost unbearable guilt. One Saturday morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Sarah had left early to meet a friend for a long walk around the neighborhood. I'd been seized by a strange compulsion. I pulled on one of her older blouses, something floral with a modest neckline. I saw the reflection of my broad frame draped in a style obviously not made for me. It didn't cling quite right around my chest, but in that moment, I was transfixed, a swirl of emotions tumbling through me. The guilt returned just as quickly. I ripped the blouse off, folded it hastily, and stuffed it back in her drawer. In my haste, I nearly didn't fold it the way Sarah usually did. Panicking, I slowed down, refolded it carefully, and slid it back where I'd found it. If she discovered it out of place, questions would rain down on me, and I wasn't ready for that. For the rest of that weekend, I was on edge. Sarah sensed my mood but didn't press me. We continued our typical routines, grocery shopping, tidying the living room, binging a few episodes of our favorite show at night. Yet beneath that veneer of marital normalcy, my mind churned with the weight of my secret. I even skipped my usual midnight visit to the closet, too anxious about leaving evidence. Eventually, a new worry crept in. Did Sarah notice? Did she see me glancing at her clothes sometimes with an intensity that wasn't quite typical? Did she catch the subtle differences in how her garments were folded or placed on their hangers? My mind jumped to 1,000 small scenarios where she would realize what I'd done. It was around that time I felt the pressure to confide in someone, anyone, because the tension in my chest was growing impossible to contain. I thought of Aaron, but while he was a friend, we had never discussed topics this personal. My mother lived in another state, and while I was close to her in some ways, I wasn't comfortable talking about this. My sister Angie was only a year older than I was. We were close in our teenage years, but we'd drifted apart a bit during college. Still, something made me pick up my phone and dial her number on a random Tuesday evening. "Hey, Angie," I said once she picked up. "How's it going?" "Hey, stranger." Her voice sounded playful. "I'm good. How are things with you? It's been a while." "Things are fine," I replied, trying to force confidence into my tone. "How about we get together for lunch sometime? I'd love to catch up." I didn't expect her to say yes right away. She had a busy schedule as a freelance graphic designer, but she quickly agreed. "I'm free tomorrow, actually. Let's meet at that cafe downtown, the one that's always quiet in the afternoons." The next day, I told Sarah I had errands after work. She didn't bat an eyelash. "Pick up some milk on your way back?" she said, dropping a quick kiss on my cheek before I left. I drove to the cafe downtown, parked by the curb, and walked in. Angie was already there, her short brown hair tucked behind her ears, sipping a latte and looking around expectantly. She stood up to give me a quick hug. "Wow, big brother, you look stressed," she commented once we sat down. "That obvious, huh?" I forced a laugh. My nerves wouldn't settle. She folded her arms on the table. "I know you. We may not talk every day, but it's easy to tell when something's off." Her tone was soft. "What's going on?" I shifted in my seat, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention to us. The cafe was nearly empty. A few patrons studied laptops. A barista wiped the counter. My heart beat faster at the prospect of speaking aloud what I'd kept inside. "There's something I haven't told Sarah," I began quietly. "And it's not your typical marital problem." Angie's eyebrows arched in concern. "All right, I'm listening." I took a deep breath. "I've been wearing some of her clothes." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't recoil or judge. "How long?" she asked, her voice calm. I felt relief flood me that she wasn't looking disgusted. "On and off for years, really, but more frequently since we got married. Nothing too extreme, just occasionally trying them on when she's not around, sometimes late at night. She doesn't know, and I don't know how she'd react if I told her." Angie absorbed the information, her gaze flickering with empathy. "That sounds like something that's been weighing heavily on you." I nodded, swallowing hard. "It has. So you're worried Sarah might, reject you? Or not understand?" "Yeah." I clenched my hands together, then released them. "We have a great marriage in so many ways. She's loving, supportive, but this is different." Angie was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table to place her hand over mine. "She loves you," she said gently. "You don't need me to tell you that, but I understand this can be complicated. If you feel you need to talk, I'm here." I nodded, my throat tight. "I really appreciate that." We continued talking for another half hour, our conversation dancing around the details. I tried to articulate the emotions, the sense of closeness I felt to Sarah when I wore her clothes, and the guilt that left me feeling like an imposter in my own house. Angie offered no easy answers, just empathy, and a promise that she was only a phone call away if things escalated. That brief talk offered me a measure of relief, at least for a short while. But the real problem was what to do about Sarah. Hiding in the dark, tiptoeing across the house, and worrying about minor details in laundry or closet organization couldn't go on forever. The secret grew in my chest, threatening to push me into confession or break me under its weight. I tried to look for an opportunity, a right time and place to talk to Sarah openly. But moments never seemed suitable. She had a major project at work that kept her stressed for days. Then her sister came to visit from out of state, and the house was full of chatter and activity. I kept telling myself I would talk to her once life calmed down. But life rarely slows to a perfect standstill. The confrontation arrived on its own. One evening, Sarah and I were in our bedroom, folding laundry together. I was trying to act natural, so when I grabbed one of her sweaters, I draped it across my arm to fold it. As I moved to place it on her pile, something in her gaze locked onto mine. "Wait," she said softly, frowning at the sweater. "When did I wear this last? It's been a while. I thought it was tucked in the back of the closet. Did you put it in the laundry recently?" My pulse hammered. She asked the question casually, but I sensed the shift in her tone. Not sure," I mumbled. "Might have gotten mixed in with the other clothes." She shrugged, but something lingered in her eyes, a dawning suspicion. "Weird," she murmured. That night, I couldn't sleep. The tension was too high, and I realized time was running out. The next time something like this happened, Sarah might actually catch me off guard. I decided it was time to talk, truly talk, and deal with whatever the aftermath would be. I owed it to her. A few days later, after dinner, I asked her to join me in the living room. She was about to head off to finish up some work emails, but my tone must have signaled that this was serious. "What's going on?" she said, sitting down. She tucked one leg under herself, turning to face me. "You're scaring me a little." I took a deep breath, seated on the couch across from her. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I've been trying on your clothes occasionally." Her forehead wrinkled. "What do you mean?" "I mean literally wearing some of your garments, blouses, sometimes sweaters. I've even looked at your wedding dress." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to hold her gaze. I didn't want to hide it anymore. It's something that's been there for a long time, even before we got married. She blinked, clearly trying to absorb the bombshell. Her immediate reaction was confusion. The next was uncertainty. "You wear my clothes," she repeated. "Why?" I stared at my clasped hands, my palms clammy. I don't fully know how to explain it in a neat way. It's not about wanting to replace you or anything. Sometimes it feels comforting. Other times, I feel a deep connection to you, like I'm closer to something important in my life. But it also scares me, because I've been lying by omission. Sarah stood up, taking a few steps across the room, arms folded over her chest. "You touched my wedding dress?" she asked, her voice a mix of hurt and astonishment. I nodded, my eyes stinging. "Only when you were asleep. I never put it on. I would just take it out and hold it, feel the fabric. Remember the day we got married. It made me feel close to you, but also distant, because I couldn't share that moment with you openly. I was terrified you'd see me differently." Sarah pressed her lips together, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could almost hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Finally, she turned around, facing me, her voice trembling slightly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I let out a long, unsteady breath. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd think I was strange. Afraid you'd wonder if you really knew me at all. Our life is so good in so many ways, and I was scared this would ruin it." She took a step toward me, her expression torn between anger, confusion, and maybe even the faint beginnings of some kind of understanding. "I don't know how I feel right now," she admitted in a quiet tone. "I guess I'm hurt you kept it from me, but I'm also shocked. I need some time to process this." My heart twisted. "I understand. I'm sorry for lying." She sank back onto the couch, resting her forehead in her hands. "This is a lot, James," she murmured. "I'm not saying I hate you or anything like that. I just never suspected. You always seemed, well, you know, the kind of guy who liked sports, joked around with his friends." She paused, exhaling heavily. "Did you ever think I wouldn't accept your habits, or that part of you? Did you really think I'd run out the door?" I could barely speak. "I was terrified. I still am." She nodded, eyes distant. "I need to think," she repeated. Then she put a hand on my arm. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight, just because I need a little space. Let's talk again soon, okay? I nodded, feeling the sting of tears threatening. Sarah gave my arm a small, reassuring squeeze, then headed to gather pillows. I listened to her soft footsteps going down the hallway. The silence that filled the house after she closed the guest room door left me feeling hollow. The next day was strained. We spoke, but in careful, polite phrases. She left for work early, and I spent the day at the office in a fog. Even Erin's jokes couldn't cut through the anxiety that gnawed at me. I wondered if Sarah would tell her sister, or a friend, or if she'd hold it in. The possibilities kept me on edge. That evening, she returned home looking tired. Without speaking, we sat down for dinner. I made pasta, which we ate quietly. At one point, she paused with her fork in midair. "I didn't sleep much last night," she confessed. "I'm sorry," I said gently. "I wish I could make this easier." She closed her eyes briefly. "Me too." The next few days continued in a slow, somewhat strained dance. We coexisted in the same space, but the usual casual kisses, shared jokes, and playful banter were absent or muted. Eventually, on a Sunday morning, Sarah called me into the living room again. She was dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair tied back, and she gestured for me to sit on the couch. "I've been doing some thinking," she began, voice steadier than it had been before. "I'm not going to pretend I understand everything, but I realize this doesn't have to be some catastrophic event. It's just part of you that I didn't know. I'm hurt that it was hidden, but I also realize this must have been difficult for you." My shoulders sagged in relief. "It was," I admitted. "I never wanted to lie. I was just scared of losing you." Sarah reached for my hand. "You're not going to lose me over this. I think we need to figure out where we go from here. It might be uncomfortable to talk about. I'm still sorting out how I feel, but I'm not going to shut you out. You're my husband, and I care about you." I couldn't hold back the tears that formed behind my eyes. I leaned forward, burying my face in my hands. She placed her palm on my back, rubbing lightly. The warmth of that gesture told me that while everything wasn't fixed, there was still a path forward. Over the following weeks, we stumbled through conversations that left us both feeling vulnerable. Sarah asked questions, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes bluntly. "When did this start for you? Is it only certain clothes? How often did you do it?" I answered as honestly as I could, but each answer exposed another layer of my fears. We had small moments of normalcy as well. We'd still watch our shows together, chat about the day at work, or discuss plans for the weekend. But the tension lingered, like the hum of an appliance in the background that you don't notice until you try to sleep. One evening, Sarah came home from a grocery run. She set the bags on the kitchen counter, and I moved to help her unload them. As I was putting away some canned tomatoes, she spoke up. "Remember you said you used to hold my wedding dress at night?" My stomach tightened. "Yes." She fiddled with a box of cereal, not looking at me. "I'm not sure how I feel about that. On one hand, the thought of you touching that gown, the most significant outfit from our day, makes me anxious. But on the other hand, you described it like you felt connected to that memory. I guess I'm conflicted." Setting the can aside, I turned to face her. "I understand. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable. If you want me to keep it in storage somewhere, or if you prefer me not to touch it at all, I'll respect that." She looked at me, her face softening. "I don't want to banish you from it. I just need time to get used to the idea that you have this different emotional bond with clothing, especially something that means so much to both of us. Maybe one day we could talk about it more, figure out a middle ground. But for now, let's just take it slowly." I agreed. Slowly became the key word for the next few months. Sarah moved back into our bedroom after that first tense night, and though we slept side by side, there was a fragile caution in the air. She'd sometimes pull away from me when we were cuddling, as though lost in thought. I understood. She was recalibrating how she saw me, her best friend, her partner, her husband, and trying to align those perceptions with this newly revealed behavior. Meanwhile, I was learning to talk about my feelings with less fear. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the words stuck in my throat, and I'd have to stop mid-sentence. But each time we had a conversation that didn't end in an argument, I felt a tiny spark of hope. One afternoon, Angie visited. She hadn't been around the house since our talk in the cafe. Sarah greeted her warmly, not suspecting that Angie might already know. I wondered if Angie would slip up and reveal my confession, but she handled the situation gracefully. We all sat on the couch, sipping cold drinks. The conversation steered toward mundane topics: Angie's latest work projects, Sarah's job, a new restaurant opening in town. At one point, Angie threw me a glance, a silent question. "Are you okay?" I met her eyes and gave a small, barely perceptible nod. She just nodded back, as if to say, "I'm glad." The next day, as Sarah and I tidied up the living room after Angie left, I could sense Sarah's gaze on me. I turned around, and she stepped closer. "Hey," she began, her voice hesitant. "I've been thinking about how to handle this moving forward. You said this part of you isn't going away, so maybe we should find a way for me to be less uneasy about it." I paused, uncertain. "Okay, did you have something in mind?" She took a breath, clearly pushing through her own apprehension. "Would it help if we talked about it in a more direct way? Maybe if I asked questions about what you like to wear or how often, or would it help if I let you wear something while I'm around?" Her cheeks reddened slightly as she said it. My heart leapt, though not just with excitement. There was a new vulnerability in her words. "Only if you're okay with that," I answered gently. "I don't want to rush you." She shook her head. "I'm not saying I'm fully comfortable yet, but I don't like feeling this constant sense of distance between us. Maybe if we take small steps, I can adjust, and we can keep our communication open." I nodded. Small steps. I'd appreciate that. So we began navigating an unfamiliar landscape. Initially, it was just talk, about clothing preferences, about the times I felt compelled to wear them. Sarah asked if there was an emotional component. I tried to articulate that sometimes it soothed me. Sometimes it felt like tapping into a deeper layer of myself that I usually kept hidden. She listened. She didn't always like what she heard, but she didn't turn away. Eventually, we reached a day when she set out a sweater on the bed. "This is one of mine," she said, her voice calm but tinged with nerves. "It doesn't mean I'm ready to watch you walk around in my wedding dress, but maybe I can start with this." I swallowed, touched by her willingness. I took the sweater in my hands. It was a soft knit, forest green. I recognized it as one she wore on chilly days. She gestured for me to try it on. Carefully, I slipped it over my head. The material stretched around my shoulders. It felt snug, but not painfully so. I stood there, an odd wave of warmth flooding me, not just from the sweater, but from her gesture. Sarah watched me, hands folded in front of her. "How do you feel?" she asked, her tone gentle, even if uncertain. I tugged lightly at the sweater's hem. "I feel surprisingly relaxed," I confessed, "and I'm grateful you're here with me." She nodded, looking at me with eyes that still held questions, but also a genuine attempt at understanding. I could see she was grappling with her own discomfort. We stayed like that for a moment. Then she managed a small smile. "Okay," she said, exhaling. "I guess that's enough for tonight." She gestured for me to take the sweater off. I did, folding it carefully and handing it back. From then on, things progressed in tiny increments. We spoke more openly, and some evenings she'd let me wear something simple, a long cardigan or a blouse she wasn't using that day, while we watched a show together. Sometimes she'd suddenly grow quiet or tense, and I'd remove the item to let her have space. It was a delicate dance of boundaries, with each of us trying to respect the other. During this time, it was as if we were discovering new corners of our relationship we never knew existed. Arguments still flared occasionally. She'd ask me a question that felt too direct, or I'd forget to gauge her comfort level, and we'd retreat into separate rooms. But then we'd remember we cared about each other deeply and come back to talk it through. One memorable Sunday, we decided to go for a walk in the park. The sky threatened rain, but we both needed fresh air. Strolling side by side, Sarah said suddenly, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about our wedding day. You were so nervous, but in a charming way. Do you remember when I was walking down the aisle, how you couldn't stop smiling?" I smiled at the memory. "I was overwhelmed with happiness. You looked incredible in that dress." Sarah kicked a pebble on the path, her eyes fixed on the trees. "That dress always symbolized everything I loved about that day. The commitment, the joy. Then finding out you'd been handling it at night without me, it felt a little like you'd intruded on a special memory." I swallowed, touched by her honesty. "I understand. I never meant to intrude on it. I guess I just missed the feeling of that day and found myself drawn to it. Sometimes I'd stand there, just remembering how perfect it all felt." She nodded, taking a moment before speaking again. "I believe you didn't mean any harm. It's just going to take me some time to fully be okay with that." She stopped walking and glanced at me. "But I also know our marriage isn't defined by just that day, or just this new secret. There's more to us than any single detail." Hearing that felt like a lifeline. I reached for her hand, and she let me hold it as we continued walking. The rain didn't come, and we spent a peaceful hour wandering through the park, lost in our individual thoughts, yet physically side by side. One evening, a couple of months after she first learned the truth, Sarah and I sat on the living room floor, sorting through old photos. We'd decided to reorganize the big box of memories we'd kept stuffed in a closet. "Look at this," she said, holding up a picture of us in our senior year of college. We stood in front of the Student Union building, arms around each other, broad grins plastered on our faces. "We look like babies," she joked. I chuckled. We were so sure we had life all figured out. "Remember I borrowed your hoodie that day because I was freezing?" she said. "It was 2 sizes too big on me." I nodded, a smile crossing my lips. "But you wore it anyway." She set the photo aside carefully. "Things change, right? Now I find out that you like to wear my clothes, and I'm learning how that fits into our lives." A nervous laugh slipped out of me. "Yeah, a lot has changed, but I'm grateful you haven't run for the hills." She pursed her lips thoughtfully. "I admit, I was scared at first. But you're still the person I fell in love with. Nothing else about that day in front of our families changes. We just have something new we need to navigate." Hearing her words brought a surge of relief. I leaned over and pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. She rested her head on my shoulder, and we continued flipping through photographs. Some featured old friends. Others were from our wedding rehearsal, the night before we officially exchanged vows. A faint pang of guilt tugged at me again when I saw her beaming in her wedding dress on the big day. But I reminded myself that at least now she knew. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than living in the shadows. A few nights later, Sarah suggested we go through our closet together. "Don't get too excited," she joked. "I'm not telling you to model every piece I own, but I think it might help if we at least acknowledge what's yours, what's mine, and any overlap." My cheeks burned. "Overlap?" She shrugged, rubbing the back of her neck. I guess so. I don't know how else to put it. This is all new territory for me, James. So we stood side by side, sorting through hangers. She pointed out certain items that she never wore anymore, and I admitted if any of those pieces intrigued me. Most of them didn't. I realized in that moment that it wasn't every single item that mattered to me. It was specific textures or certain shapes. She seemed to relax a bit, seeing that I didn't randomly crave to try on everything. It made it clearer that there was a sense of personal meaning behind each piece I gravitated toward. "Do you want me to get rid of these if you like them?" she asked at one point, holding up a simple cotton dress she rarely wore. I shook my head. "No, that's still yours, Sarah. I'm not trying to take over your wardrobe." She smirked, a bit of humor lighting her eyes. "I know. I just don't want it to be weird if I wear something that you also like." I paused, considering how that would feel. "I think it'd be okay. Honestly, I feel a closeness to you in that scenario, but I also don't want you to avoid wearing your own clothes just because you think it'll unsettle me." She nodded, rummaging through another section. Our conversation was punctuated by quiet acceptance of each other's perspectives, though still laced with slight awkwardness. When we finished, we both felt a sense of relief. Nothing had fully solved the complexities of our situation, but acknowledging them seemed like a step forward. Weeks melted into months, and bit by bit, the everyday rhythms of our marriage found a new normal. We didn't discuss my clothing habits constantly, nor did we pretend they didn't exist. Sarah established boundaries. Some items remained off limits, like her more cherished dresses, especially her wedding gown. I respected her wishes, grateful she hadn't asked me to bury this part of myself entirely. Occasionally, she'd see me wear a neutral cardigan or a soft sweater, and sometimes she even gave a small, thoughtful smile, as though trying to show she was okay with it, at least in small doses. We still had arguments. The initial shock in her eyes had faded, but it wasn't replaced by blind enthusiasm. Instead, it was replaced by a cautious willingness to let me share more of myself. I, in turn, had to learn how to handle her moments of doubt or the occasional late-night question, "Are you unhappy with me?" Or "Is this a phase?" Each question stung because it revealed her uncertainty. Each time I responded as gently as I could. "No, I'm not unhappy, and I don't think it's a phase." We clung to honesty, even when it stung. One evening after a quiet dinner, we were sharing a bottle of wine on the couch. Sarah set her glass down and turned to me. "Do you remember that first time you held my wedding dress? That night you told me about?" I tensed slightly but nodded. "Yes." She drew in a slow breath. "What did you feel exactly?" I thought for a moment, searching for words that wouldn't sound hollow. "I felt almost like I was touching a memory. The lace, the satin. It reminded me of the excitement of that day. But I also felt this pang of regret because I was experiencing it alone instead of with you." Her eyes softened. She scooted closer, resting her head on my shoulder. "Thank you for telling me. I think it helps me understand why it mattered so much to you." We sat there for a while, her head nestled against me. A sense of fragile peace filled the room. I realized that despite the tension and the tears, we were finding a tentative way to remain connected. Eventually, Sarah spoke again. "I'm not saying I'm ready for everything. I'm still uncomfortable with you touching the wedding dress without me. But maybe, one day, we can talk about that. If there's a time when we both feel okay about it, we could figure out what it would mean for you to share in that memory a little differently." I felt a wave of emotion surge in my chest. "I'd like that," I said quietly. In the months that followed, we continued weaving this new thread into our life's tapestry. There were ups and downs, moments of relief and moments of tension. We built a framework of honesty, If I wanted to try on something more personal, I'd ask first, or at least warn her. Some nights, she'd still rather pretend that part of me didn't exist, and I'd respect that. On other nights, she surprised me with a gentle curiosity. Our conversations veered into deeper territory about what our future might look like. We discussed the possibility of children one day and how that would intersect with this aspect of our relationship. We talked about extended family, about how or if we would ever discuss it with them. We realized that the path ahead was uncharted, but at the center of it all, Sarah made it clear she was here to stay, even if the journey was messy. A year after the night she first slept in the guest room, we found ourselves on a quiet evening at home, sipping tea in the living room. I was wearing a soft cardigan she'd outgrown. She was reading a book, legs curled beneath her. The lamp cast a warm glow across the room, and a comfortable hush fell between us. After a while, she set her book aside, watched me for a moment, then quietly said, "I love you." My pulse fluttered. "I love you too, Sarah." She extended a hand toward me, and I took it, letting our fingers intertwine. We didn't need to fill the silence with more words right then. Despite the lingering uncertainties, her small gesture said enough. We were two people still forging a life together. My midnight secret was no longer entirely hidden. It hadn't driven us apart. Late that night, when we finally headed to bed, I passed the closet and paused. The garment bag containing her wedding dress was still there, but somehow its presence didn't fill me with the same potent mixture of longing and guilt it once did. I glanced at it, remembering that first night and how desperate and isolated I'd felt. Then I glanced at our bed, where Sarah was waiting. We had a lot more to learn about each other, but we had a chance to move forward. I followed her into the bedroom, my heart a little lighter than it had been in a long time. We climbed under the covers, side by side, sharing the warmth of the duvet. Her foot brushed against mine, a small, comforting gesture that said we were both present, here together. As I closed my eyes, I realized that even though we might never have all the answers, we were finding a way to live with each other's complexities, and for now, that was enough. The days ahead would be filled with real-life concerns, bills, chores, career decisions. But there would also be further conversations about the boundaries of my habits, the ways we might share experiences, or the times I'd need privacy. There would be misunderstandings, moments of renewed anxiety, and countless small efforts to hold on to the love that had brought us together in the first place. Our story was continuing, far from a tidy resolution. But it was ours, and it contained the possibility of new layers of closeness that neither of us had anticipated. And that was what kept us both moving forward, one careful step at a time.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.